I never told the whole story to anyone. Not my brother, not the cops. Hell, I barely believe it myself. But every October when the leaves drop and the air gets that damp, earthy smell, I'm right back there, shivering in a tent that wasn't safe. 2 years ago, Sarah and I decided to disconnect. I'm a software guy. She's a nurse. We'd been grinding nonstop for months, and a long weekend in the backcountry felt like the only antidote. I'd read about a secluded loop in the Green Mountain National Forest. No cell towers, no crowds, just a 4-mile hike to a creekside clearing. Late October, no bugs, crisp air. I threw my Osprey pack together the morning we left, shoving stuff in with my usual "I'll fix it later" attitude. Sarah, ever the organized one, neatly packed hers the night before. We parked my Subaru Outback at a gravel pull-off just after noon on Friday. No other cars. A handwritten trailhead sign warned, "No facilities, next 15 miles." Perfect. We strapped on our packs and started walking. The trail was a carpet of wet leaves, skeleton trees scratching the gray sky. Sarah smiled a lot. I remember thinking this was exactly what we needed. By 3:30, we found the spot, a flat shelf above a gurgling brook circled by hemlocks. We pitched our MSR Hubba Hubba, got a small fire going with deadfall, and cooked those overpriced dehydrated pad thai packets. As darkness swallowed the woods, we sat on a log sipping bourbon from a flask, talking about nothing. Sometime around 9, the wind died completely. I remember joking, "Even the forest knows it's bedtime." Sarah laughed. I wish we'd paid more attention to that silence. I woke up around 7, stiff but content. Sarah was still in her sleeping bag, breathing slow. I crawled out to make coffee. My pack lay right outside the vestibule where I dropped it, except it was unzipped, wide open. I froze, staring. I'm a chaotic packer, heavy stuff on top, socks jammed into side pockets, no logic. But now my sleeping bag was at the bottom. The stove and fuel canister rested neatly on top, clothes folded, first aid kit tucked vertically along the back. Everything arranged like a retail display. My heart started thumping. I checked. Wallet, keys, knife, all there. Nothing missing. I told myself I'd been sleepwalking, or Sarah had pranked me. Then I saw the slip of paper in the side mesh pocket. It was a torn-out notebook corner, beige with tiny blue lines, handwritten in neat block letters. "It's more comfortable to carry this way." Sarah stirred. "What's wrong?" I showed her. She went pale and scrambled for her own pack. The same, neat as a military footlocker, and an identical note in her front pocket. Same handwriting. "Kevin," her voice cracked. "We didn't hear anything. Nothing." That was the worst part. I'm a light sleeper. The unzip of a pack zipper is loud. We should have heard something. Here's the thing I replay constantly. Instead of packing up right then, we rationalized. Some weirdo hiker? But we'd seen no one. A ranger teaching a lesson? No vehicle. Sarah mentioned stories of campers doing things in hypnagogic states. I latched onto that, half believing. "Look," I said, "it's just a bad joke. Nothing stolen. We'll keep an eye out." Looking back, that might be the stupidest decision of my life. The day felt off. We hiked a short loop to shake the jitters, but the woods seemed to press in. Around 2 in the afternoon, we found 3 small cairns, stacked stones, about 20 yards from our tent, arranged in a perfect triangle. I was sure they weren't there in the morning. Sarah's breath quickened. Then back at camp, my bench-made folding knife sat on the log by the fire ring, blade closed, aligned exactly north-south. I never leave it out. "Okay," I muttered. "We're leaving tomorrow at first light." But the sun was already sagging. We had maybe 90 minutes of usable twilight. 4 miles, rough terrain. No headlamps could make that safe. We were trapped. We ate cold protein bars, spoke in whispers. I propped my hiking hatchet by the tent door. The silence that night was heavier, like a held breath. Then the fog rolled in, thick enough to taste. Our Petzl headlamps made glowing bubbles in the gray. We zipped ourselves in before 8, fully clothed, boots on. I don't know when I first heard the footsteps. Maybe 11 p.m. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Deliberate, slow, circling. Leaves being crushed by something heavy. Not an animal. Animals don't walk in perfect, patient circles. Sarah grabbed my arm so hard I bruised. The steps paused right outside the tent wall, maybe 6 inches from my head. A smell drifted through the nylon. Damp earth and old leather. Then a whisper, not words, just a wet, rhythmic exhale. My skin crawled from my scalp to my spine. I saw it before I could process. Sarah was pointing, trembling. Through the tent fabric, a silhouette. Tall, human-shaped, but too still. It stood there for 3-4 seconds, and then just melted into the fog. No retreating footsteps. We didn't sleep. We clutched each other, hatchet ready, eyes burning into the dark. At 3:25 a.m., I know because I was staring at my watch. The zipper on the vestibule began to move. Not fast. A slow metallic purr, tooth by tooth. Cold air sliced in. "Hey!" I roared, swinging the hatchet at the opening. I hit nothing but air. I lunged out, headlamp slicing wildly. Nothing. No footprints, no movement. Just the fog, suffocating. "Run!" I choked. "Now!" We exploded from the tent. I left everything except my headlamp and the hatchet. Sarah had her phone, useless. We ran. The trail was a black tunnel of roots and mud. Branches whipped my face. I heard something moving parallel to us, maybe 50 feet into the trees, matching our pace. A steady crunching cadence that wasn't our own. Short sentences. Just keep moving. Don't look. Don't stop. A root snagged my boot. My ankle twisted, and I went down hard, pain shooting up my leg. Sarah hauled me up, and we hobbled, half dragging, sobbing. The noise in the woods stopped at the same instant we crossed a small wooden footbridge. After that, nothing but our own ragged breathing. We stumbled into the trailhead parking lot just as the sky turned milk. The Subaru sat alone, covered in dew. I fumbled for keys, noticed the hatch. Muddy handprints smeared across the glass and metal. Too large to be ours, too small to be a bear's. 4 distinct fingers and a thumb. I didn't care. I shoved Sarah inside, floored it, spitting gravel for half a mile before I let myself look in the rear view. At the ER, they called it a severe ankle sprain. The cops came. We gave a statement. They found our tent, packs, everything untouched. No other tracks but ours. No notes. They looked at me like I'd had a psychotic break. I don't blame them. Life changed. I couldn't walk past a dark window without my chest tightening. I sold every piece of camping gear I had left. We moved into a high-rise apartment downtown. Steel and concrete, no trees. I slept with a nightlight until I was 33. Sarah and I broke up 6 months later. We couldn't look at each other without that night flooding back. A year after, I was cleaning out the Outback before trading it in. I opened the glove box to grab the registration, and there it was, a folded piece of beige paper with tiny blue lines. I didn't want to open it. My hands were shaking. Inside, in the same neat block letters. "It's more comfortable this way." I still don't know what it was. Police never found a trace. I've never gone back to the woods. But sometimes, late at night, I feel that cold draft from a door that isn't there. And I wonder if something is still watching, still tidying up my life. I've never been one to buy into backwoods spook stories. Grew up hunting whitetail with my old man, spent plenty of nights alone in a bivy bag deep in the Mark Twain National Forest. Every weird sound got filed under wind, critter, or tired brain. But what happened in November of 22 up in Bridger-Teton, that doesn't slot into any reasonable box. 2 years later, I still wake up drenched if I dream about that note. Cole and I had been doing an annual backcountry trip since college. He's a surveyor, tougher than a pine knot, not the type who jumps at shadows. That year we took a full week and pointed his Toyota Tacoma toward the Wyoming range. By late afternoon on the 3rd, we bounced down a gravel spur until it dissolved into 2 ruts, parked the truck, and humped our gear half a mile into a stand of lodgepole pines. The spot was perfect. A flat clearing, a creek 50 yards east, no human sign for miles. We pitched my MSR Hubba Hubba NX with the door facing the fire ring, stacked deadfall, and settled in. The evening was damn near idyllic. We boiled Mountain House pouches, passed a flask of bourbon, and shot the shit about old girlfriends and missed bucks. Sometime around 10, I kicked off my boots, a pair of Mindel Comfort Fit Hunters, still stiff from the break-in period, and placed them carefully to the left of the tent door, toes pointing out. I always do that. Cole tossed his battered Crispies next to mine and crawled into his bag. I remember giving the boots a stupid little salute before zipping the fly shut. In the morning, that memory would feel like a bad joke. I woke just before dawn because my feet were cold. Unzipped the tent, stuck my head out, and froze. My boots were gone. Not tipped over gone. Absent. I blinked, rubbed the grit from my eyes, and saw them. They were 10 yards away, standing side by side on the far edge of the clearing, toes pointed toward the tent as if they'd been set down with the same care I'd used the night before. And in their place, right where I'd left them, sat a different pair. Faded, beat-to-hell work boots, the leather cracked like dried river mud. Same size, was probably a 10.5 or 11, but old. Not antique, just worn through by someone who lived in them. I shook Cole awake and pointed. He stared for a solid 10 seconds, then said, "Dude, did you sleepwalk?" I've never sleepwalked in my life. We crawled out and examined the ground. The frost had crisped the grass and left the dirt firm. No footprints. None. Not a scuff. If I'd walked barefoot to retrieve my boots, there'd be tracks. If somebody else had come in, same thing. Nothing. The silence pressed in, heavy and damp. Cole, being Cole, tried to logic it away. Maybe some local asshole is pranking hunters, rangers, meth heads, I don't know. Forget it. He busied himself with the stove while I stood there in my sock feet, looking at the stranger's boots. I didn't want to touch them, but my own boots were 10 freezing yards away across stubble and frozen moss, and I wasn't about to shred my feet. Reluctantly, I picked one up. The leather was flexible, like it had been worn yesterday. I tipped it upside down to check for spiders and felt something stiff against the insole. I fished it out, a rectangle of yellowed graph paper folded into a tight square. My fingers were already starting to shake as I opened it. The handwriting was janky, all caps ballpoint, pressed so hard the paper tore in places. It read, "Try them on, they fit better." Every hair on my arm stood up. I spun around, scanning the tree line. Nothing moved. No birds, no squirrel chatter, just that hollow November stillness. I held the paper out to Cole. He glanced at it, and I saw the blood drain from his face. Just a flicker, then he masked it. "Probably from the factory," he said. Bullshit, and we both knew it. Nobody prints a message like that in a boot. And these boots were decades old, the soles worn smooth, the stitching frayed. I had no choice. My feet were going numb. I slid the left boot on, then the right. They should have been loose. They should have rubbed, but they didn't. They cupped my heels, hugged my arches, and the footbed felt warm. Not the kind of warmth you get from a campfire, but a living, residual heat, like somebody had just unlaced them and stepped out. My toes curled involuntarily. For a second, I had this overwhelming sensation that I was wearing somebody else's feet. I took a few steps. They were quieter than my mandals, practically silent on the frozen ground. Cole asked how they felt, and I lied. Fine. The truth was they felt alarmingly comfortable. That scared me more than the note. We spent the day in a strange haze. We didn't hunt. We just paced around camp, arguing, trying to concoct rational explanations. A weird hermit, a hallucination, anything. Twice I caught Cole staring at the woods with his rifle cradled. As the light died, the air thickened. The mist crept back, snaking around tree trunks. We built the fire high and talked less and less. Around 3:15 a.m., I jolted awake. My Garmin Fenix glowed on my wrist. Something was moving out there. Not an animal. Animals don't walk that evenly, that deliberately. Dry leaves crunched in a slow, steady cadence, circling the tent. Step, crunch, step, crunch. It made a full loop, then another, tighter this time. My heart was slugging against my ribs so hard I could see my jacket tremble. I could hear Cole's breathing change. He was awake too, frozen. The step stopped directly behind my head, no more than 3 feet away. Silence. Then a sound I will never, ever unhear. A single fingernail dragged slowly down the nylon fly. Not raking, not scratching, but a controlled, almost gentle pull from the roof seam down to the ground. It took maybe 5 seconds that stretched into an hour. And then a voice, low and conversational, right at the mesh. "Fits good, doesn't it?" I screamed. Not words, just a raw animal noise. Cole racked the lever on his rifle and bellowed, "Get the hell away, I will fire!" The silence that followed was absolute. No retreating footsteps, no breathing, nothing. We sat back to back, guns in hand, not blinking, until the sky blued at the edges. I didn't put the boots back on that night. I sat in my bare feet, shivering, smelling my own fear sweat. At first light we moved. We threw essentials into our packs, left the tent standing, and marched. I pulled on the stranger's boots without thinking. It was that or walk barefoot through the frost. My own Mendels were still sitting out there in the clearing, like a pair of abandoned tombstones, and I couldn't bring myself to go near them. Halfway to the truck, crossing the creek, I slipped on a moss-covered stone and went down hard. My ankle twisted, cold water flooded over my legs, and my Benchmade folder popped out of my pocket and vanished into the black water. I didn't stop to look for it. I scrambled up and kept moving, my limp growing worse. Every time a twig snapped behind us, I nearly vomited, but no one was there. That's the thing. The whole flight felt like fleeing from a stare rather than a body. We reached the Tacoma. I tore the boots off the second I climbed into the passenger seat, threw them into the footwell, and wrapped my hands around my head while Cole gunned the engine. We drove 6 straight hours without talking much. I kept glancing in the side mirror, half expecting to see a figure standing in the gravel road. Nothing. Back home in Salt Lake City, I stuffed the boots into a trash bag and heaved them into the dumpster behind my apartment. I showered until the water ran cold. For 2 nights, I didn't sleep at all. On the 3rd day, Cole called. His voice was quiet, strained. He said he'd found a scrap of the same graph paper in the pocket of his hunting jacket with a single printed letter, W. He asked me if I'd put it there. I hadn't. I hung up and called the police. A detective from the county sheriff's office drove out to meet me. His name was Marshall. Gray crew cut, eyes that had seen too much of stupid tragedy. I handed over the note, explained everything, and even fished the boots out of the dumpster, wearing dish gloves because I couldn't bring myself to touch them barehanded. Marshall took them into evidence without comment. A week later, he called me back. Forensics had pulled DNA from the insoles and the sweat-stained leather. The sample matched a missing person named Wayne Hargrave, a 58-year-old drifter, no fixed address, who'd been reported gone in August. Hargrave suffered from advanced diabetic neuropathy and chronic foot ulcers. His last known location was a shelter in Pinedale, 90 miles from our campsite. Witnesses said he'd been walking around in deteriorating boots with his toes exposed, in obvious pain. How his boots ended up neatly placed outside my tent, still warm, with a handwritten note inside, Marshall had no answer. "Son," he said, "I've been doing this 20 years, and I don't have a theory that satisfies me." Hargrave was never found. I sold my truck, my camping gear, my rifles, everything. I moved to a different state, I sleep with the lights on, and I can't walk past a shoe store without my throat tightening. The thing that keeps me up at night, though, isn't the whisper or the footprints that weren't there. It's the handwriting. I've caught myself signing a receipt or jotting a post-it, and my capital W will suddenly come out crooked. Just like that, try them on. I tell myself it's a coincidence, but I still don't know what that was, and I'm not sure I ever will.